I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Good evening, everyone. Seems like quite a time since we've seen each other. And I've been told with daylight savings time coming this weekend that spring is right around the corner. So if we just hold out a little longer, we'll be fine. I will ask everyone if there is any public comment from the board this evening. Do you have any public comment?
Yes.
Okay. Good timing. Okay, take a few breaths.
I apologize, I had some car trouble. Okay. I wanted to announce that at the planning board meeting on February 23rd, Nathan Lockwood announced that he is not seeking re-election. And last night, the current planning board chair, Joanna Bellotta Simeone, announced her resignation to the board. I had to breathe for a second. Both Nathan and Joanna have dedicated years to the town of Lunenburg, and their hard work and commitment to this community are greatly appreciated. My heart is going a mile a minute.
Okay, hold on.
I just ran.
No. I'll announce a few things. Get your breath.
Okay,
and then you can start again.
Thank you.
Okay. First, I would like two things from the Boys and Girls Club. First of all, they want everyone to save the date for June 26th, 2015, from 4 to 7 p.m., and this will be a 10th year anniversary or birthday party of the opening, back when it was the Chester Mossman building, Teen Center, and now continued through to the Boys and Girls Club. So that's June 26th of this year from 4 p.m. to 7 p.m. That will be, I believe, at the club, but more, the date is important. We'll get all the details as we go. Also from the Boys and Girls Club, after the Are You Smarter Than Our Sixth Graders was postponed because of all the snowy weather in February, that will be held the end of this month. So that will be Friday, March 27th. It will be starting at 6:30. The doors will open at 6 at the Lunenburg High School auditorium. And all the same things apply. So if you are interested in forming a team and playing, that is welcome. If you are looking for all different levels of sponsorship, from everything from corporate sponsorship to sponsoring a category, sponsoring a sixth grader, sponsoring a team, or sponsoring questions, that is all online. And you can get that information from the Boys and Girls Club website, which is www.bgcluboflunenburg.org. And again, that's Friday, March 27th at 6 p.m. It opens. The game starts at 6:30 at the Lunenburg High School auditorium. Mrs. Bertram.
Okay, sorry about that.
No problem.
I literally ran to the meeting. So as I was saying, at the planning board meeting on the 23rd, Nathan announced that he is not seeking re-election to the planning board. And last night, the current planning board chair, Joanna, announced her resignation to the board. They both have put in an incredible amount of hours and years of dedication to the town, and their commitment to the community is greatly appreciated. The planning board plays a crucial role in the town's development, growth, preservation, and protection of open space and economic development. And I encourage anybody that's interested in being on the planning board to attend the Citizens Party Caucus on Monday, March 6th at 7 o'clock in the Turkey Hill Middle School. It's truly been an honor to serve the residents of Lunenburg as a member of this board for the past 9 years. And at the caucus on the 6th, I am asking for the support of Lunenburg citizens for the privilege to serve another term.
That answered one of our questions we had before the meeting started, so thank you. And I also would like to add, I just heard the news today about both of those resignations, and I want to, and we'll have time at town meeting, et cetera, but I want to thank both Nathan and Joanna for all the work they have put in. Doing the planning board and going through the plans and the hearings and everything that they do is a lot of work and a lot of time, and they both have done an excellent job of really, taking those paths for all the different projects that have been facing the town over their tenures. So again, thank you for their service, and good luck in their future. But we'll be seeing each other through the town meeting time. So I did have one last announcement. Every so often, I don't generally announce people's passings, but sometimes somebody has put in a lot of time for the town. And although it happened a couple of weeks ago when we weren't meeting, there was a passing in town of Charles Deming Sr. Mr. Deming was a graduate of the class of 1952 here in Lunenburg High School. He served on the 275th Anniversary Committee, he served on the Lunenburg High School Athletic Hall of Fame, and in 2012, he proudly received the Lunenburg High School Alumnus of the Year Award. And most notably, he served on the Lunenburg Fire Department for 49 years as both a firefighter, and he was an EMT for the 1st Lunenburg Fire Rescue Squad. His son also served through the police department here in town too, so that's a lot of service. I met him several times. I did not know him well, but those years of service I thought really required an announcement, and I know his son somewhat, so our condolences to the family and to all his friends at the fire department, and thank you in passing for all your years of service. Okay, any public announcement from the public? Any appointments? None. So, 7:05, proclamation for the Boys and Girls Club Week, which will be March 22nd to March 28th of 2015. I will read the proclamation, then we can take a vote on it at the end. Proclamation, whereas the young people of Lunenburg are tomorrow's leaders, and whereas many such young people need professional youth services to help them reach their full potential, and whereas there is one Boys and Girls Club in Lunenburg providing services to more than 150 young people annually, and whereas Boys and Girls Clubs are places where great futures start, and they are at the forefront of efforts to encourage and develop academic success, healthy lifestyles, and good character and citizenship. And whereas the Boys and Girls Club of Lunenburg helps ensure that our young people have a place to go after school, offering not only a safe and supportive place, but also providing them with quality programs. And whereas the Boys and Girls Club of Lunenburg will celebrate National Boys and Girls Club Week 2015, along with hundreds of clubs and millions of young people nationwide. Therefore, the Board of Selectmen of Lunenburg do hereby proclaim March 22nd through March 28th as Boys and Girls Club Week in Lunenburg. We call on all citizens to join us in recognizing and commending the Boys and Girls Club of Lunenburg for providing comprehensive, effective services to the young people in our community. Undersigned by the Board of Selectmen. Should we vote on this tonight? All 5 members here present.
I make a motion to support the proclamation for Boys and Girls Club Week of March 22nd through March 28th.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? None. It's going down. Current business number 1, review and approve domestic violence leave policy and workplace violence policy.
So this is a request to approve 2 policies. The workplace violence policy is really an update of our existing sexual harassment policy. It's a little more inclusive than that policy and in compliance with really the requirements set forth either under state law or suggested guidelines from our insurance carrier. The purpose of the workplace violence policy is to advise all that the town is committed to providing an environment that is conducive to personal safety and security during all work-related activities. The policy outlines prohibited activities and advises that violations will result in disciplinary action. This, of course, is a policy that's applicable to town employees. The policy also gives the town manager the authority to issue procedural rules and guidelines to carry out the policy if necessary. The second policy is the domestic violence leave policy. And the purpose of this policy is to provide all employees leave for domestic violence subject to the Domestic Violence Leave Act, which is Mass General Law, Chapter 149, Section 52E. The policy outlines the conditions under which an employee may take leave and the procedure that must be followed in order for the leave to be granted. The policy also gives the town manager the authority to issue procedural rules and guidelines if necessary. Both of these policies were drafted in-house and reviewed by Labor Council. The drafts were based upon ones that Maya, our insurance carrier, presented to us. Labor Council made a few suggestions. I did also make a note that as part of an ongoing process, we are reviewing all of our policies and procedures against state law to make sure that we are in compliance, and where we need to update policies, we will be bringing drafts of those to you for your review. And I also mentioned that approval of a number of these policies entitle us to insurance credits through Maya, so that is a secondary reason why we're going through to make sure that we're up to date.
Good
One thing I might mention, I did just send you something very late this afternoon on the insurance credits that are available to us through Maya. I think it's worth mentioning. On an annual basis, Maya gives us the opportunity to receive insurance credits against all of our lines of insurance for undertaking activities which include inspections of buildings and vehicles, heating systems, or for participating in training. And I did, in the information I sent to you, I showed you the checklist for the current fiscal year. It changes each year, and Maya will pick out different areas or activities that they highlight each year. We have participated in this program in the past, but not to the fullest extent. I do expect that this year we will be able to receive at least 50% of the credit that's available to us, probably higher than that, and then the goal going forward would be at least 90%. I'd like to say 100%, but sometimes things just aren't. They're not applicable to us, or it's just not the right time for us. But the total value of the credits available to us is over $11,000.
Oh.
So again, I think we will get at least half of that this year. And I think one of the benefits is particularly the training. A lot of their training is online, so people don't even have to leave their office. We can offer the town, meeting rooms in the town as a space to bring training here and open it up to other Maya clients, which we will look to do. But a lot of this, the training, it's very relevant. It's not that it's just something to do. It's training that is very relevant. So it's important for us to take the opportunity to do that. One of the things that we can do that I sent around today is attending the Citizen Planner Conference, which really there's something in it for lots of boards. I think members of this board would find it beneficial, Planning Board, Conservation, the ZBA, staff members. There is a cost to that conference, but we get credit for attendance at several of the workshops. And so I think that's a worthwhile opportunity. That's a little more, but I wanted to have the opportunity to tell you about those programs because I think it's not a lot of money, and it's not just about the money. It's about the training and best management practices.
Now, is the training, who's eligible for it? Town employees, board members, just lots of different people?
Anybody, any board or committee member, elected official, appointed official, town employees. Almost all of the trainings are at no cost. Some are available online, some as webinars, some as self-directed tutorials. Most of them are on-site training, but there are several that are really relevant to a broad range of people. I mean, there are some that are very specific defensive driving techniques for the police department. You can't do that. Or you probably can't do that, but there are lots of other things that are relevant to a broad scope of people.
The training flyer that you sent out today was very interesting. There were a number of things that were relevant to things that are going on here. Economic development, for example, was one of the subjects. Writing a bylaw was another. Policies and procedures. I mean, there were. I just viewed it very briefly, but there was a lot that are for various facets, and I definitely think there's training that is interest to this board.
I mean, I'm going and I'm doing starting with the very basics, the intro to the zoning law, there's one on special uses, and I can't remember what the third one was, but I think it is a Saturday, so it's...
That's the one in Worcester?
It is, so it's local.
It's convenient.
Yeah, it's in Holy Cross.
We don't, we don't have a lot of professional development money in the budget. That's something that has been cut back. This is a very cost-effective program. It's local, and again, most of these things that Maya offers are free of charge.
Do you know if they only do it once a year, or is it, unfortunately, I'm away that weekend and I'd love to go to some of them. Is it only once a year?
This particular conference is once a year, but this same group offers a citizen planner curriculum that it looked like it extended more in the fall than in the spring, but maybe the spring is not out yet.
Okay.
But they offer a number of classes. I think you may have even attended something because they're all over the place.
I've attended a number of different things.
Yeah,
so.
but and they offer several different locations, several months of the year.
Okay, great. Thank you.
I had you pegged for the defensive driving for police. Has anybody reviewed the workplace violence policies?
Yes,
I just want to
read
point
it
out,
all.
I think there's a typo on the first one, on the workplace violence policy, on Roman numeral 2, letter D.
Okay.
The last, well, I guess I was going to say the last sentence, but it's all one sentence. It says, at all events and are prohibited during any work-related travel or business conducted outside of the town property except by, I think the with is extraneous.
Oh, yeah.
Aside from that, that's the only thing I found, otherwise it makes total sense to me. If it makes total sense to somebody else or all of you, I will entertain a motion.
I would make a motion to adopt the workplace violence and domestic violence leave policies.
Do I have a second?
Second?
Any further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? None. You want me to sign something? Am I the only one signing?
Yeah. Do you mind signing the one with the typo? Just change the typo. It's on, they're on two different
Mhm.
pages.
Okay.
Oh, sorry.
Okay. Number 2, discussion and review of the FY16 budget. So the last Tuesday, a week ago, the town manager presented the budget to the FinCom in this room. I don't know how many here, I was not able to attend, but
I think the rest of us were here.
everybody else was
Yeah.
here. Okay. So I'll open it up.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry.
I wasn't able
Okay.
to attend, actually.
So I will open it up if somebody wants to, first of all, I'll open it up to town manager if you have anything you'd like to say in opening this. Or I will open it up to the board if somebody wants to.
Not necessarily. I talked an awful lot last week.
That was a week ago. You're allowed to talk somewhere in the middle of that.
I'd like to start out by saying that I appreciate the town manager's hard work on this with her staff. It was clear, it was concise, there was backup information. The PowerPoint information was not bogged down in detail, but gave the highlights, which I thought was very appropriate. I know that we've got a lot of work to do as we go through the budget, that it's not as, it was not as good as the town manager had hoped it would be initially, but it is funding the departments to various levels of service. And with the Finance Committee being the review of that, and I look forward to participating in that and having discussion here later. The one thing I would like, I know that the presentation shows appropriated for the prior years, whether there's any ability to have the expended by the prior years, at least at a high level, that just gives an idea of, I know you did that with certain departments. I'm not sure how much work that is with encumbrances and everything.
Yeah, it's not a lot of work to put it together. I think it's more work explaining it, and I'm happy to do that. And the issue really is with the encumbrances, because we have prior year encumbrances that we add in and encumbrances for the next year that we take out. And I think one of the goals Karen and I have to have is to come up with an expenditure report that makes sense for people to look at. It just, if you try to compare appropriations and expenditure, sometimes it looks very funny because of encumbrances. You know, if we have something going at the end of the year, you know, even, it could even be just a contract that gets signed in June, and if it's a large contract, it gets pulled out and added, and it just, it's not as clean. But we
Right.
do need to do something, because everybody wants to see
Yeah.
what the expenditures are.
And that was one of the discussions at the library during the budget, that the report that comes out includes encumbrances, and trying to explain that to the lay board. I mean, I understand what they're doing, so I don't think that that's going to change the budget process, especially for this year, because of the limited funds. It's more of, I would agree with a goal for trying to do that, to show what was appropriated, what was expended in that year,
Yeah.
including encumbrances carried over, minus the ones from the prior year, so. Okay, thank you.
Do that.
During the town manager's presentation, she suggested that going forward, we spend more time discussing goals, what our budgetary goals are, and I thought that was really well put and well explained. You know, are we just trying to balance the budget? Is our goal, like in 5 years, to really be working on the roads, or is it on something else? And if we don't, as she explained, if we don't articulate our goals and start thinking about it, we're just never going to get there. And I thought it was worth bringing up, and something that we should really try to do. You know, even I know, the 24/7, people at ambulance is probably not going to happen, but is that something the town wants to happen? Or a better road, something the town wants to happen? And should we try to devise a plan where we're putting a little bit extra in so that we actually get there someday, instead of just putting it off all the time? You know, do we think that in 5 years we're going to need an override? Can we plan for that so that citizens have 5 years to plan for that? Or can we try to think of, is there a way we can avoid getting there in 5 years, Just more thought out and well-defined budgetary goals. I thought it was a great point.
Well, I will say to that I think it's also a great point. I will also say that we have, from the Board of Selectmen and the request of residents, have done that in the past. We had a whole host of things that we as a board discussed maybe 3 or 4 years ago. And we went through, outside of the scope of budgeting, but just in the scope of, okay, are these things that we want to have happen? Roads, increasing police officer counts, increasing, where we wanted to allocate money, what departments needed, either restructuring or who needed extra additional work, members to do the work. the road, like I said, the road management, pavement management plan was part of that. And we went through and we agreed on all that. The problem with that is, and then you could say, okay, well, we have to tighten up the budget. You can use every buzzword we can think of. But the problem is you can never get to a goal because it denies what the problem is. Nobody wants to hear what the problem is, at least in Lunenburg. I can't speak for other towns, but we have been doing this. You know, I've been on this board for 10 years now, and people have been doing it well before that. It's a matter of, we've reduced the workforce, at least on the town side, since we've been here, since I've been here in the 10 years, and to increase them means that you need to have money. So putting together the goals of what you need to do is important, it's critical. But it's only critical insofar as reaching the goals if you have a way to get the money to do it. Because every one of these things is about money. And, you know, we've been blessed in the last few years with, you know, 2 zeros in a row with health insurance. Mm-hmm. Now we have a 10% one, but that we knew that, you know, that wasn't going to last forever. So, you know, we're still in unsustainable territory as far as the budget goes, as far as I'm concerned. You know, I'm not against the idea of doing it. We have done it. I just think that if it doesn't have an end game, if it doesn't have a way to plan it so you actually can do something to get to it, I mean, and that's barring anything unforeseen, like 100 inches of snow in a month where you blow through your budget, and now we're looking at, you know, $200,000 overage that was unforeseen. Even without that, it gets tough to plan. So
I guess one of my thought behind making that point at the budget presentation was it felt like going through the budget this year that what happened was I pushed a little money to almost each department, but none of them were able to accomplish anything that they wanted to do. So my thought is there are definitely several items, programs out there that people have talked about. 24/7 ambulance coverage, more police officers, in no particular order, more funding for the school, more funding for roads or capital. If they're all equal priority, then I don't know that we have any chance of accomplishing them unless there's an override. But if they are prioritized, and I mention roads because, and people can laugh at my plan of how to get to $1 million worth of funding, but it's a plan, and it's a doable plan if we stick to it, and I don't know that we would have come up with it if I didn't hear everybody saying roads was most important. So what's the next most important thing? And I know it's not as easy as that, but if we could start talking about and identifying what the next most important thing is, maybe we can come up with a plan. But if it's just going to be everything, then it's just not going to happen without a very large override. And I don't think that's going to happen.
I think some of this may be a situation that we all understand and we all recognize as an equation that's very difficult, if not impossible, to solve. But the terminology we use gets us to the same place every year. I think the town manager did an exceptional job putting together with her department heads, you know, a target budget, a presentation of each of them that we're seeing now, that what you would do above target, and then the reality of data from the state and data from our revenue stream tells us that we probably can't achieve even the target that we set out. So we have discussions like, yes, we've heard an excellent presentation from, just pick one, the fire chief or the police chief or roads, and everybody can nod their head in terms of, you know, that's the right thing to do, that's a great thing to do, but we don't have the money this year, and then we move on, and I guess the task becomes, we've accomplished the task because we balanced our budget. And I think what I'm hearing is the terminology has to be, if you're not going to put some money into it, the level of service is not going to get better. It's going to be what it is. And we don't have 24-hour service, and we're not going to have 24-hour service unless something major happens. Whether it's an override or a change in priorities, that's a fair discussion. But I think it's in a way, it's unfair to keep saying that we all agree that that's what needs to happen, but it's impossible to happen this year, so let's balance the budget and call it a victory. It's not a victory.
Well,
And I'm not.
I agree with you. Your characterization of it, I think, was perfect. I think you're absolutely right. I mean, I think, first of all, by law, we have to have a balanced budget.
Right.
So it's not like that's not even up for discussion. We have to have a balanced budget. The real question is, it's, as I've said before, and it's no trick to balance a budget. I mean, anybody could balance a budget. The real trick is to balance the budget and meet what you believe the needs of the town would be from administrations, from department heads, from the residents, right? That's the trick. Eventually, I don't think we hear a lot of clamoring from any of the departments more than the others, because they all know we're in the same straits. And so we go on, it's like, okay, well, nobody got more than me, we're trying to balance and, ease the pain across the board, but nobody makes a big push to say, yeah, listen, we can't, somebody's got to come up to say, we can't keep doing this, because eventually it just erodes the services that you're looking at.
I agree with everything that's been said, but I also think that, as the town manager talked about, there is a plan to achieve greater funding for the road management plan. So if we develop other priorities, if we make that a priority, how do we financially achieve that goal, and in what time frame do we achieve the end goal? And I think that there's limited funding. So when we put together the budget, if we were to have, a top priority, a second priority, a third priority, and a plan on how we're going to achieve those goals, and take that into account when we go through the budget process, rather than, okay, I can give the police this amount, they can't meet any of their goals, but I'm going to give them a little bit more, and I'm going to give a little bit more to the fire department, I'm going to get a little bit to this. It's not working, because there is only limited funding. So I think the idea of prioritizing, looking at what we have as long-range goals for the departments, whether they be 24/7 at the fire, whether it be more police officers, whether it be road management, or some other goal. How do we financially achieve those goals? First of all, are they attainable? And second of all, how do we get there? And I think that we have to do that. We can't meet all of them within a year. We can't meet all of them probably within 3 years. But how can we attain them, and how do we do it?
So, a couple of things. We could do some prioritization of saying the new growth for the next year is going to be targeted to something instead of just putting it in the pool. The local aid increase, for instance, Chapter 70 may go up a little bit more. Well, that goes to the school, because that's what we do. If there's some other lottery money that came in, we could say any extra money is going to go to this part, which then means we're not going to send it to the other.
Exactly.
And so when we talk about a declining revenue situation, some organizations just do across-the-board cuts and say everybody cut 10%. Well, that's a budget exercise, but in the end, you don't want to do that, because that doesn't do the thing the correct way, because you're going to cut something a little when you actually could cut it more, and cut something else when you shouldn't. So I'd say let's look at it the other way, that if we have a 5% increase in revenue, where should that go, and not just balance it? I think this year it's too late to get into that process. We're too far down the pike. The other thing I'd note is that taxes are going to go up 10% this year, because it's the first year of the new school funding part. So going for an override is not going to probably be politically feasible at the moment. And I'd also position that I'm not going to say that I'm never going to be for an override, but 2 years after we get an override, we'll still never have enough money to do everything we want to do. So it becomes, when do we go for targeted overrides that'll work on something specific, instead of something just everybody gets something, and I think that it'll be easy, just like we were able to get the large majority for the school debt exclusion. I think that we'll be better poised if we tell the people, here are the specific things we want to do. And I think we're going to have to, the time I've been able to see the various contracts that we have, and we have contracts that with cost of living and steps are greater than our 2.5 to 3% increase of taxes, which you talk about unsustainable, is something that I don't want to take money away from our employees, but if that's a structural issue, then I think that's something that we need to deal with the legislature and other people like that as far as what are we actually going to be able to do going forward in the future. So I would recommend that June, we start goal setting for the following year, that type of thing, and just start the process, maybe do a charrette with the community and try to get people in addition to the town departments, but the constituencies of the various people throughout the community. And at least it'll be a dialogue and create some sort of discussion. I think everybody who's talked already said valid points, and I think that it's tough, and it's going to always be an issue that we're always going to have to deal with.
Just want to make one, I agree with you, and we can certainly do that. We can bring back the last goals that we did that I mentioned 3 years ago, because I don't know that we've addressed any of them because of the money issue. But the one thing I do want to say, I think it certainly is the common sense what Mr. Ebersol said, that if you pass an override, then in 2 years' time, you don't have enough money. I would say that it doesn't have to be like that, because if you control, and I think this town over the past 12 years has shown a lot of restraint and a lot of fiscal management. Especially under the leadership of the town manager, when you get your bond rating up, there have been very good, strict fiscal policies. And the time that the last override was proposed, we talked about that you don't get all the money and spend it all at once, that you actually create a buffer and you ease the money into the priorities that you want while you really hold tight to the purse strings. But right now, we don't have any purse strings to hold tight to. Everything we're trying to do is just fund what we funded last year, and even that is a problem. So I understand that the sensibility is if you pass one, people are just going to ask for money right away. I'm sorry, and maybe in some places in the Commonwealth, that's true. I know there are places that have passed lots of overrides for lots of things. We haven't passed one since 1997 or 1996 or something, I believe, in this town for an operational override. And, I think we've done a heck of a job with fiscal management in that period. So, it can be structured so that it lasts a long time, but it gives an infusion to do some of the things that people are looking for. But we can, right after the budget season, set the priorities. One of the things, by setting priorities, if you're going to target new growth, which is really all, for the most part, new growth and the 2.5 levy increase are the only two increases you really get. If you target new growth and you put it in one department, because that's what you need to do to make them achieve some goal, you just run the risk. It's manageable, and you can certainly set expectations, but you run the risk of pitting departments against each other on town meeting floor, which is what we've been, able to avoid for the most part.
And that's why I think it's really important that we involve the departments as well as the citizens. And as Mr. Ebersol suggested, is start this early, have some charrettes. I think the first step is to meet with the departments and identify their various goals, and then also the citizens from the input from the citizens is going to be critical. But I think this has to be an open process and a dialogue so that doesn't happen.
I agree.
Well, I felt like at that meeting when the police chief was presenting his budget, and one of the FinCom members was saying, geez, I feel really bad that you're not able to get this. He was kind of defending the town manager. He's going, there isn't enough money, He said, we just can't afford it. So it felt like he had the right spirit. He understood that he wasn't trying to pit the police department against anybody else. He said, listen, we just don't have it. We have to figure out a way within our budget to achieve that.
I think what was behind that, though, and it's important to point out, is that the member of the FinCom was alluding to unfunded mandates and suggesting that in addition to those that we all know about that come from the state, there may be some that came from the Board of Selectmen. And I think that's the very reason why we have to have very clear goals on what it is we're shooting for, and have it become a mandate that the town's behind, that the department managers are behind, and that's funded, because that's really the proof of whether we're behind it or not.
And actually, that did raise a question in my mind, because I think there was a directive from this board. It was the issue related to the funding for Narcan, and Narcan training. And I think there was a clear feeling of this board that that was something we wanted to fund. And you know, due to the budget constraints, it wasn't funded. And I did have a question on, because I was unclear, I think that I kind of read between the lines that while that we could not support the Narcan for all of the officers, that we could potentially obtain some of the Narcan and then develop a system by which the officers are now going to have to bring it into the building and then give it to the officer coming on duty. The training itself, that component was not, could be incorporated into under training, so we are going to achieve that objective. Am I wrong in that, or how is that?
We are, I think, just in a manner a little differently than we would under ideal circumstances.
Yeah, so the chiefs figured out a way to get it, even
Right.
though there wasn't enough money, which I thought was very commendable.
And I agree with Mrs. Luck. I mean, the chief did understand that it was something that we all believed should happen, and he was going to find a way to make it happen.
I love that spirit.
Right, but I do too, and I think that was, I think his presentation was wonderful, and I think his stance was also terrific. But I do think it's important that we as a board, when we talk about goals and objectives and setting goals, if that is a goal and that is an objective and we've given that task, then we also have to fund it.
My point exactly. I agree.
Which may end up coming from another department.
Right.
Which
That's right.
So as
That's right.
as
It goes
Tom
back to
mentioned,
goals and objectives.
it's going to be somewhat of a fact.
Right.
Okay, we're going to leave this, obviously, this item on the agendas from now till the end of when we have town meeting, so.
Well, I kind of wanted to talk about one more thing.
Sure.
In the paper, I read that the DPW has had to halt the sand and salt, for citizens, except for the sand and salt for seniors, which is run by the fire department and very controlled. And I agree with, I read, I think in the ledger that it was costing something like $2,000 a week, which sounded like an awful lot of money. But my point was, if it's unsustainable for us to offer this to citizens, if most citizens aren't able to take advantage of it anyway. I mean, years ago, I used to go with a couple of buckets in my Jeep, and it's hard to get the sand into your Jeep, and it's also, not everybody can avail themselves of it because it's not that easy to do. And but all of us through the taxes pay for that option. And when I went to get the sand, there was no control. I mean, I could have shown up if I had a pickup truck and filled a pickup truck, and no one would have known the difference. And I think the DPW director alluded to the fact that it is taken advantage of. And I wonder if we should decide this spring whether or not to pursue that anymore. Because if in this spring we say, listen, we're just not going to make that available anymore, then the people who have gotten used to using it will have summer and the fall to make another plan. I mean, on our fire road, we have a couple $100 worth delivered at the top of the hill. Everybody uses it. When it's gone, we replenish it. And, we don't need to go take that from the town, and it's not that difficult. So I would think that there are other ways people could arrange to get that taken care of if they knew that we weren't going to do it anymore. And I think it's more fair to decide in the spring than in February.
I have no problem terminating it. I mean, I because it's not controlled, and I know
Right.
from both from hearsay and also from people who witness it directly, that it's abused by some people, which is always unfortunate. But even if it wasn't, even if everybody went and got 2 5-gallon buckets, I mean, if every household, 3,500 people showed up and got 2 5-gallon buckets, that's a lot of money.
Right.
I mean, sand and salt used to be cheap. not cheap anymore. It hasn't been for, a good number of years now.
Well, I think I don't know when the town started the program, but for a long time, I think until 2007, we didn't purchase sand because we had our own supply. So that it was in, I want to say 2007, maybe 2008, when we had to start purchasing. So it probably made more sense when we didn't have a supply cost. Not only do we have a supply cost, it's gone up significantly in the last several years, and as people mentioned, it's not something that everybody uses, and it is a luxury, I guess, for lack of a better word, that we probably can't afford.
Mm-hmm.
I definitely think it's a program that we need to talk about. I've lived in the community for 28 years now, and I have used it in the past. Not this year, but I have in the past. But if the decision's made to terminate it, I think it's important that we give residents the notice that they can make other plans. I also think if we decide to continue it, we have to put controls on it. It can't be you can drive up with a loader and fill up your loader, which I think could be happening. So I think it's maybe a tough decision and it may impact residents, but it may be at a time where we can't financially offer that program anymore. And at a minimum, if we did decide to run it again, I think that we have to change it. So we definitely have to talk about it.
But control has a cost.
Right, exactly.
That's right.
And we need to make sure that we, as the board, don't micromanage the DPW as opposed to that. But I agree that this has public impact, that it's our responsibility to have that discussion and then turn it over to the town manager, work with the DPW to implement.
Well, I don't even think we need, I don't think we need a sand policy. The sand policy and salt policy should come from the DPW and the town manager.
But
I think we should add it to our policies for the Board of Selectmen.
Yeah, we need is salt and sand.
True grit.
Yeah.
All right.
Wow.
But it is the budget season, and we're talking about not having enough money for things, and that seems like a glaring example of, maybe that's something the town shouldn't be spending
Well,
money on.
it's a non-necessity.
Right.
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 I make sure I put that right.
You were right.
Okay, set a meeting time for a workshop with the planning board and identify the topics. So we have a list of topics here. Earth removal bylaw, village district bylaw, stormwater management, economic development plan. Obviously, unless we're going to schedule a weekend with them, we're not going to get to all of these. So we need to talk, since we just talked about priorities, about budget goals, here's some more priorities. We have to decide which one of these we want to talk about in the meeting. We could probably put on two, I'm going to guess.
We do. I have confirmed that there is a quorum of the planning board available next Tuesday, the 10th, and your list of items is pretty short, so I thought you could meet from 7 to 7:30 and then start at 7:30 with the planning board.
So we'll have let's say an hour and a half till 9.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the things, my understanding, the planning board is going to go forward with the village district bylaw, so I would suggest we do that. The economic development plan, I believe we need to talk about, but that's somewhat on hold based on what Adam was talking about at one of the planning board meetings, that they wants to collect some information.
Okay.
But I'm not sure. Earth removal bylaw, were we going to try to do something for this town meeting, or?
No.
I don't think
No.
Okay, so.
But we still want to talk about it.
Right. But stormwater is in the budget. It's my recommendation, we do village district bylaw and stormwater.
And I would agree, and I wanted to actually mention stormwater, and I was going to do it under action file issues, but I'll bring it up now since we're talking about it. The Conservation Commission, it was put in the paper that the Conservation Commission is working on a stormwater bylaw, and looking at the agenda for the Conservation Commission for tomorrow night, it's actually, they're having a work session to talk about goals, objectives, stormwater bylaw, and regulations. And I think it's important, I applaud the Conservation Commission for moving ahead with this. This is a subject that I am very concerned about. From both a budget perspective and an environment perspective. I think there are a number of departments that need to be involved, from DPW, from a regulatory component, from the NIPD's permit. financial for the cost associated with maintaining these structures, and I think we've got to look at a stormwater utility. Planning because of planning board, and obviously conservation because of wetlands impacts. So my concern is that if the Conservation Commission is looking at adopting additional regulations or revising, or actually it looks like it's another layer, we all have to be working in conjunction with each other. And we have an existing stormwater bylaw and regulation under the protective bylaw. And I want to make sure that the Conservation Commission doesn't adopt something that's in conflict with that. I also think that the DPW has to be involved, as well as possibly either the Finance Committee or this board, from a regulatory perspective for fees. So I think that there's a lot of pieces to this puzzle. So certainly I'm happy to talk with the planning board, but I think it's imperative that we involve the other components, and starting with the Conservation Commission and the DPW.
So I asked Adam, for my benefit, to put together a memo outlining all of these issues. Who should be, what do we need to do, what's the timetable, who should be doing what? And I think if he's ready to do that, maybe that's a good starting point. We certainly can invite or make the Conservation Commission aware. Maybe they could send a couple of people. We can have the DPW director there. But I think it would be helpful, at least for me, and I'm assuming some other people that will attend, to just start from the beginning. What do we need to do? Who does it? When do we need to do it? And to the extent we know what the costs are what are we gonna do in-house? What do we need a consultant for? What type of consultant do we need? It's a really big, comprehensive issue with a lot of players involved.
Right, and when we talk about consultants, I know both Phyllis and I have mentioned in the past that we attended a stormwater kind of workshop with Ed Himlin from the Massachusetts Watershed Coalition, and he actually has submitted a proposal which we forwarded to Kerry to take a look at, but we have to talk about that, because obviously it's an item in the budget. It has to be funded because there are mandates that we have to do, and as the NIPD's permit comes out, the regulations are going to be even more stringent, and we need to be poised to comply with those regulations.
And we have to all be on the same page, too. We can't have, groups all over the place. Just won't work.
So if we're not quite ready for Tuesday to move forward with that, and I'll let Adam know that's the priority, and hopefully we are, but if we're not, is there...
Then the earth removal.
The earth removal, okay.
Yep.
All right. Okay, so, and again, we'll plan on like 7:30 to 9 next Tuesday.
Yep.
And just on the village district bylaw, the hearing on the village district bylaw, the public hearing is actually the night before, on the 9th.
Okay. So next Monday.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And I would urge that if we can at least find out what the Conservation Commission is working on relative to stormwater, I think it's very important.
I think our role as a board in the stormwater is going to be to basically keep a top-level handle on who is taking care of what task, because although it is comprehensive, there are definitely Conservation Commission components, there are definitely Planning Board components, and we just have to make sure that anything they references the same material and the same regulations, so that we know that we're achieving the same thing. But I mean, obviously, when it comes to I'll just take something. So a new subdivision. Obviously, the planning board is going to have to know about what are going to be the accepted kinds of stormwater management systems that we're going to be looking at, and that the DPW is going to be involved in applying, providing their own consultation about what they are poised to and what they have the equipment and the expertise to help manage of those systems. The conservation is going to say what can and can't go in, and what has to be, stopped from going into all the wetlands and all the waterways. So, there's a lot of different things that we just have to I'd see our role as more coordination.
Absolutely, and I do too. But my concern is, looking at what the Conservation Commission is doing, and again, I applaud them for defining goals and objectives for the commission and moving forward on some difficult subjects. But I just want to make sure that we work in harmony with each other.
Right.
And that's my concern. And my biggest concern is obviously I'm concerned from the environment, but I also, when we talk about budget and we talk of lack of funding, this has the potential to be an enormous financial burden to this community. And I'm
In what way?
For example, the stormwater structures, you mentioned that, and one of the things that I had mentioned during a planning board meeting as a citizen, not as a member of this board, is the possible standardization of stormwater structures. So that in the event, because many of these developments are giving over the care and custody of stormwater systems to the town once the road is accepted. And so I mentioned the possibility of standardizing stormwater structures and was told by the then acting director from MRPC that we couldn't do that wasn't allowed from a regulatory perspective. Since then, I've found that communities are in fact doing that.
I was going to say, I don't see any reason why
And
they
so,
don't.
because if we're mandated to maintain them, we need to have the equipment in order to do so. So, for example, there have been numerous developments that have been constructed that are going to require a vacuum truck. The town of Lunenburg doesn't own a vacuum truck, nor do we have the personnel to take care of that structure. And these require quarterly maintenance. So when and if that system fails, and it's really not an if, it's a when, because if you don't maintain a structure, it's going to fail, the cost is going to be to the town of Lunenburg. So that, there's a major financial component to this question. And honestly, my biggest issue is, why are we taking over an ownership and operation and maintenance of these structures? There's no requirement that we do so. Our existing protective bylaw requires that an operation and maintenance plan be submitted that outlines who is going to own it and how it's going to be paid for. Why are we taking ownership?
Okay, well then if
So-
that's an option,
so-
that seems to be a good way out of your financial disaster.
But it is, but that's not the current practice. And
Right,
so I
well,
think
that's what we have to talk about.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly.
The other thing that I was able to catch the end of that hearing at the library on the stormwater that impressed me is that the concept is not just looking at the structures and the water, but going back to where the water originates and actually go to houses and where do their drain pipes go. And therefore, that may be regulated not by the Conservation Commission, because you may have a house that's nowhere near wetlands, but that you want to have people keep the water on their property. So it's a change of focus, and so therefore, that might be a DPW, it might be a general bylaw, it might be something else, and so therefore, the coordination, but I think we're going to need to be more involved than just assuming that it's a land use.
Exactly.
The typical land use of planning board and conservation, and that's why I'm glad Adam is here, is that he can be involved in the entire process and that it may need to be enforced through the building permit process or something else like that. So, whether the subdivision maintains the responsibility to maintain their septic system, their stormwater, but maybe we do that within other neighborhoods in the town itself, so that there's lots of different things that could be involved in that.
But I want this board to sort of serve as the leader in getting everybody together and getting on the same page.
And I agree with Mr. Rubisol when I was at that seminar too, that, the presenter made it very clear that the more, pardon the pun, but the more upstream you catch the stormwater, the easier it becomes, and you can make small systems on properties, certain kinds of gardens, rain gardens. Then it goes out to the street. Okay, well, there are certain street things we can do. Then it comes into larger things. So the more water that can collect as it goes down, the harder it is to treat because of the volume. So, it's a large issue, and I think it really needs to be addressed.
Pervasive.
Yes.
And I'll take, to go to the 30,000-foot level throughout the United States, there are parts of California where it's illegal to collect rainwater for their own use, because it doesn't recharge the water. Yet in the Florida Keys, it's the responsibility of all the property owners to have rain catchment in order, because there's no water there. So when we talk about, the various resources the United States has, the Northeast is blessed with water. And that's something that we need to take care of. And Lunenburg Water District takes care of its water, and we need to make sure we do that. And so, and then we have the lakes and the streams and recreation.
Right, and recharge is a critical component.
Yeah,
So when you talk about rain gardens, and you talk about vegetative swales, and you talk about best management practices, that's important, because it's absorbing the water rather than shooting into a stormwater structure and taking it elsewhere out of the town of Lunenburg.
I'm just filling my shed with all the snow. And that'll tide me over to at least October.
That's good.
Okay, so that's what's on the agenda for next week after, okay. Vote to authorize emergency expenditure under Mass General Law, Chapter 44, Section 31D for the library.
So, as you are aware, on February 17th, we had some significant damage to the public library as a result of pipes that burst. We did file a claim with our insurance carrier. We do expect everything to be covered by insurance, but it's likely, at least for the significant expenditures, that we're going to pay and be reimbursed. And because this is not a budgeted expense, the State Department of Revenue has advised that we should have the board vote to declare an emergency and to authorize the deficit spending under Mass General Law, Chapter 44, Section 31. Likely, the cost to the town is nothing with the reimbursement, but because we have the expenditure, and it's possible that the expenditure goes past the fiscal year, not likely, but we did have that happen before, and this is a requirement of state law because it would be considered deficit spending. Just to give you an update on what's happening at the library, we had 14 heating coils that were damaged and replaced. It may have actually been 16. I didn't have an opportunity to get an update from the DPW director, but all of the heating coils have been replaced and the heating system has been restored. We did have the sprinkler system tested and it is working. The next item to check off, and I think it's happening tomorrow, is we will have our health and our insurance claims adjuster here and ServPro, who is our contractor for restoring any water damage at the library, to do a moisture content analysis where they will jointly determine what, if anything, needs to be replaced in terms of carpeting or walls or anything like that. So hopefully that's going to happen tomorrow. At this point, we don't have an anticipated full reopening date for the library, but I did meet with the director this afternoon, and residents are able to check materials out of the library. You have to use the online system, and each day there is a portion of the day that the library is open where people can come in and pick up any items that they've reserved through the online system. I did talk to the director. She's interested in seeing if it's possible to open a portion of the library, because there are people who like to come and read the newspaper or magazines. That's part of their routine, and they're missing the library. So we will, I recommended that she talk to facilities, talk to the insurance adjuster to make sure there isn't any issue. And if it is possible to open a portion of the library where people can come and stay, that would be her goal, to do that in the short term. I think I put in the memo a little bit of information about the burner, and I think we're still learning about what happened. What I would like to do is, once we get past this, I'd like to have DPW put together a comprehensive report about what they think the issue is, what they've done on a regular basis to maintain that system, and what we should do going forward. And I think that's something that this board and the trustees should hear together in a public meeting. In speaking with the director, she did remind me that at least for a year and a half, DPW has been working on this issue trying to identify the problem, what the problem was and what the solution would be. And they've brought in numerous consultants and the manufacturer, and it's not as easy as the burner was undersized and it should have been replaced, and why didn't you replace it? It's just not that easy, or not that simple. So I think it would be beneficial for both boards to receive that report and figure out what we're going to do going forward, because what I heard today, replacing the burner might not be the solution. So we're making progress. It is slower than everybody anticipated. Just getting the parts, the replacement heating coils was a little bit of a challenge. The installation was over extended period of time, so it's taken longer than anybody expected, but the library is able to maintain some level of service to residents of the town.
Go ahead.
I'm sorry, just a question. Does this post-mortem on the burner, when they find out what the root cause was or whatever, does that have any potential impact on whether we get reimbursed from our insurance carrier or
No,
not?
I don't think so, but I don't expect that the insurance carrier is going to pay to replace that.
Okay, but they're not going to claim that it was our burner that caused the damage and therefore it's
No,
not
I mean,
covered or anything?
we're able to document that we
Okay.
regularly maintained
All right.
that system.
Any other questions or comments on the town manager's update on the library?
My first question at one of the library meetings was, did they damage the carpet enough so that therefore the capital planning item for replacing carpets would be taken care of through the insurance? And unfortunately, the answer is no. So they may have to replace a portion, but even then they thought,
But do they have to move the books as a
Well,
result?
not where the damage was. They didn't do the stacks.
The one thing I didn't mention, but it is in the memo, is that the damage to library materials, books, was $4,600. So it was probably less, it's significant, but less than we probably originally thought. If you've, I don't know if you've had the opportunity to be in the building, certainly it is open portions of every day of their regular schedule, so if you are interested in going and seeing, please do so.
And are those hours posted on the library website, the hours that they're open that limited time?
They are, and I believe there was a story in the newspaper as well
Okay,
with that
thank you.
information.
And it's on the door, too.
Okay. My grandson is constantly asking when he can go back to the library,
So
so.
he can go to pick up materials but not stay.
Okay, okay.
Don't drop them off.
Well, he's 4, I wouldn't do that.
That's good.
Yes, you will have to check him out. So again, if there's no other comments, then I would entertain a motion on the request to vote to authorize the emergency expenditure as requested by the town manager.
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? None. Discuss appointment of committee to negotiate the new cable license.
Okay, so it really is time to move on this item. I think it makes sense to have a separate committee or task force, whatever you want to call them. I think under state law they're called a committee. One thought would be maybe to have a couple of members from this board and a couple of members from the Public Access Cable Committee to just serve on this rather than trying to create a new committee. This is a committee with a relatively short lifespan, with the intent to renegotiate the license agreement. Comcast, the license holder, has met its requirements and notified us in the timetable that they are required to do so. There's 2 ways you can go about renegotiating the license, either through a formal process or an informal process. Even if we hope to achieve the renegotiation through an informal process, there's certain things that you should do as part of the formal process really to preserve your rights. And the first one is a public hearing where you invite the public to come in and identify any issues it has with the license holder. And that's something we really should do during this month. So I think, given that the easiest thing is, if there were 2 people from this committee and 1 or 2 from public access, I don't know if odd numbers usually work better for committees, so, I don't know how easy it is to do that with a 3-member public access cable committee. We don't need a lot of people, we just need people who are interested in this. It's very technical, but there is a good outline of what we need to do. So I think that would be the easiest thing to do.
Is this a competitive process? I mean, is there a possibility to ask anybody else to bid, or is this just a renewal of the existing one?
Anybody who provides a service can come in and ask. It's a totally non-exclusive contract.
Okay.
So anybody can come in if they want.
But this is a request to renegotiate
Right.
this
With them.
particular
This one.
license.
This is not, they're not responding to a bid request that we've
Understood.
asked them.
Understood.
So one of the things that I recommend that we follow your recommended procedure. But I'd also like to see if we could affirmatively reach out to Verizon to see if, even if they say no, whether they would be considered doing FiOS in the town of Lunenburg. There are certain parts of the town on the fringes that are covered by our surrounding communities. We do have a substation in the center of town, and before we do the official tie ourselves to actually officially doing the renewal with Comcast, I would like at least the process of that. And I don't know if anyone has any personal contact that to get us into their system, because I'm sure that it must be layer upon layer of who actually might consider this. I'm not necessarily holding out much hope for this, but at least if we do our due diligence and then at the same time do the discussions with Comcast.
Well, again, I mean, I just want to be clear, and I think you know this already, but I mean, it's completely non-competitive. In fact, it has to be non-competitive, because if one came in here and another one asked, nobody can get preferential pricing from the board, or preferential treatment. We would have to follow whatever other contractors enforce to the best of our ability, so we couldn't give somebody a sweetheart deal or anything.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we're just open to the town. So it's not like, I mean, I'm perfectly fine. In fact, I know Verizon had Lunenburg scheduled for FiOS before the financial collapse hit in 2008, and they pulled back from everything because they put such a push out for FiOS, and they didn't have the subscriber level yet to get the revenue in, that they just stopped. And I'd love for them to come in here, because I'm personally tired of DSL. And when I work at home from IT, it gets painful. So, but I mean, we can do that, but it doesn't have anything bearing on this anyway. And I'd be more than happy, by the way, to serve on the committee as one member.
One question that I have, I did read the information in the law that was sent within the packet. And within 6 months, the town has to conduct an ascertainment proceeding. So, and you talked about the need to have that hearing this month, and that's because it's the 6-month timeline. Do we just have to start that process within that 6-month window? That's one of my concerns.
I believe so, but I will make sure to...
Okay, because the law says that we have to do the ascertainment proceeding within 6 months of the submission of the letter, and the 6 months is up at the end of actually the 22nd. So while I'm certainly behind a cable advisory committee, and I think it makes sense, I just want to understand the timeline that we're under. I also think it's important that I think the public hearing is a great idea. I think we need to get feedback from the community, but I also think we might want to think about, there's a license renewal process guide that was part of our packet, and it outlines several steps in addition to a public hearing, such as doing a municipality-wide survey, and I think we could do that very simply on the website by doing SurveyMonkey. So I think that's something, if we could get something up, and we can tweak it as we go, but get something up online. I think it's important that we reach out to the schools, the senior center, the police and fire station, the DPW, to determine if they have needs that aren't being met. Are there any consumer complaints? And there's actually a form that has to be filled out and forwarded to the Cable Advisory Company? Can we get that information? So I think there's some important background work that we need to get the complaint records, the map of the service area, the financial forms that they have to have, which are the forms 200 and 400. So I think that there's a lot of information that we can start pulling together now, but I'm really concerned about the timelines and what our legal ramifications are if we don't complete this process by the 6-month period, which is the 22nd.
Well, this is they put formal process in quotes, as you see, so.
But the law actually is very,
Right, but the law, I mean, I don't think the town doesn't use up any of the, doesn't lose any of their rights if we had heard from the residents, outside. What is somebody like, what are the possible ramifications of not having?
that was one of my questions, is because you talk about preserving rights. What are those rights, and what is it that we're trying to preserve? Because I'm not sure, this is a contract negotiation, so
Right.
what do we default on if we
Right,
don't
well,
meet
that's what I'm
these
saying.
timelines?
It's
Right,
not like
right,
if we
right.
They're gonna
don't
wanna
meet
work with
the
us.
timetable,
Right.
we have to accept whatever
Right,
they.
Right,
Exactly,
right.
that's not
So,
true.
But that's one of my questions, is because you outlined within your opening statement the importance of preserving our rights, and I'm not sure if the contract is up, which it actually is up in September of 2017, so we certainly have enough time right now
I don't
in
think they
which to
want it to be
negotiate.
egregious.
Adversarial,
I mean,
right,
Well, no,
right.
and they don't want it to be egregious. I mean,
Right.
you can't say, if you did it in 7 months instead of 6 months, I don't think
Right.
anybody's going to clamor. If you did it 18 months after, like 5 months before the renewal, the expiration of the current contract, I think somebody may raise some eyebrows. So we're not, as long as we're not dragging our feet, I mean,
Right.
we're certainly
Well-
well within our.
But
Time.
we
Right.
do have to follow the law.
Yeah.
of
Right.
If we have the hearing, I guess the other question is that the last time we did this, did we hire counsel or a consultant to assist the committee?
I would imagine so, but I don't know for sure.
I think that to make sure that we take the goodwill and turn it into an official legal document at the end, we want to make sure we have that assistance.
Yeah.
We check with Copeland and Page if they do it, and if they don't, do they have a recommendation of a firm who does it?
Oh, I would imagine Rick Holland is the attorney at Copeland and Page that handles this. Rick is the attorney we worked with on the net metering
Net
credit
metering.
Sure.
agreements. I
So
think
he's
this
very
is
Great.
his
Well,
work.
I had a good feeling about working with him, so.
So, I mean, we can put this on for next week. I can put together more detail on this, get some of these questions answered, and if you could be prepared next week to, unless people just want to volunteer.
I'd be-
And I would be
Yeah,
willing as
yeah,
well.
I
It-
would
it's-
too, so.
However, you
Okay,
wanna do
everybody
that.
wants to do it.
So we got 3 out of 5.
And I'm assuming hopefully at least one person from PAC would be interested and
Well,
have
hopefully
the
two,
time.
because then if we have 3 of us and 2 of them, but
Yeah.
actually, we have 3 of us, isn't that?
I
That's
think,
I think we can't do that.
Yeah.
can
Oh, of
we?
course we can
Well,
do
it's-
it, we just have to
Well,
post it,
okay,
that's all.
Okay.
right.
Yeah, and contract negotiations are in
Right.
public,
Right.
so.
Should we set the date for a public hearing now, or should we wait?
Well, let's wait for next week.
Okay.
Yeah, I think we
And, I mean,
probably should.
we want to follow it, but I don't,
I just, the letter is actually dated September, and it was on our agenda in September, and we didn't take any action, so
Right.
I just want to make sure we take
Yeah,
action.
we also want to make sure we set the date when public TV will have time to actually televise the hearing.
Yep.
so,
Right.
yeah.
Yep. Okay, so we will choose officially that, if we can reach out to PAC.
Yeah.
And see if they can get a volunteer for 1 or 2 people. Okay, minutes.
We have minutes.
Oh my God, that's right.
Oh, I don't know where
We're
they
back in the
are.
minutes business. Okay, we have minutes. They're not here.
Anybody see the minutes folder?
Is the minutes there?
Is this it, the minutes?
Yep.
All right.
Thank you.
I bet she comes right back.
The envelope, please.
Okay, warrants.
Accounts payable.
Accounts payable warrant in the amount of $392,934.55. And action file issues from anybody?
Goals,
Yes.
selectmen's goals.
Yeah, no, we purposely didn't put it on because we had all this stuff this week, but we will put it on for next week.
Actually,
And I will submit it.
it actually won't be next week because we're going to work with the planning board.
Well, I'll make sure that I send it out because I know Mr. Ebersol requested that it be sent out.
Yeah, I would like
what
to
they
at least
were, yeah.
review the list.
Yes.
yeah.
We should have put, obviously, should put goal number one is to get the goals for everybody.
The only other thing is just the reminder, as Mrs. Bertram mentioned, that Monday, March 16th is the Town Caucus, Citizens Party Caucus, which is the first opportunity for somebody to run for office.
And next week, it's been published in the paper, but next week I will announce what offices are available, so we can get a list of that. But it's been published in the Ledger the last couple of weeks. And again, the caucus is at the Turkey Hill Middle School cafeteria, as it has been for years. And since we're talking about people running for things or volunteering for things, we still have an opening for the Finance Committee, and we still have 2 openings for the Public Access Cable Committee.
And we also have an appointment for conservation, as we've had a resignation from conservation.
I'm not sure we've actually received that.
I was going to say, I haven't heard of the resignation.
I heard that there was going
Well,
to be
I believe that their formal letter has been sent to conservation. Perhaps it didn't come to us.
Okay, well, it hasn't come to us yet, so.
But I know it was announced by a member at the meeting. Unfortunately, Sheila Holt, because of conflicts with her schedule,
Okay,
had to resign.
okay. Well, in an attempt to be proactive, we haven't seen the resignation, but if you're interested in the Conservation Commission, this is a good time to get a talent bank form in, too. Committee reports, Board of Health.
So in the context of people either resigning or not running for election, George Emond announced at the Board of Health meeting yesterday that he will not be running for re-election after 24 years of service.
It's a lot of years of service, so thank you, George.
And they worked on a normal review of septic and well issues that I've reported on in the past. They did have an agenda item regarding the farmers market as a result of our talking with the Agricultural Commission and town manager's communication with them. And they did note that there is no jurisdiction as the Board of Health over the farmers market as it exists, but that they do have involvement for particular vendors depending on the particular product sold, so it depends on that. So that if the Agricultural Commission establishes a market, then the vendors are still going to have to comply with the things they've had to comply in the past, and the market itself has to comply with it. But that the Board of Health has no jurisdiction over the establishment of a farmer's market.
So we should, now that, and they voted on that?
No, they didn't vote on it because they noted that they didn't.
Okay.
They
So then
didn't
we
have
should
any-
put that, we should put it on our list, if not for next week, the week after, so that we make that, so we as the board can determine that it should be under the umbrella of the Ag Commission. With that caveat, obviously, that is clear, that obviously anybody selling any food items.
Right, and I think we actually mentioned that to the
Right.
Agricultural Commission when they were here.
Yep. Building reuse.
The Building Reuse Committee was supposed to meet last evening, but postponed that due to the Planning Board meeting that was scheduled for last evening. So we will meet next on March 18th. And I should also mention that we had a resignation there. Dave Matthews has resigned from the Building Reuse Committee. I'd like to thank him very much for his contribution, along with his many contributions to the town in other capacities. And at this particular point in time, if we had a talent bank form, or if somebody was interested, we'd certainly consider it. But there's a lot going on with the town meeting and the zoning and everything. So what I was going to hold off actively promoting a replacement for Dave until we know exactly what we're looking for. Dave's position was an at-large position. And as we know, as we find out the village zoning and what properties, patios, et cetera, we may be looking for a particular skill set. But if anybody's interested in joining the committee, we'd be more than welcome to discuss that.
And so they submit a talent bank.
Yeah,
if
right,
they want.
exactly.
And I do want to take the opportunity, too, to thank Dave Matthews for his work on that committee, too. Put in a lot of time and hours, and so wish him the best away from the committee and away from the Selectmen Board.
That's right.
Capital Planning,
No report from Capital Planning.
Finance Committee.
Finance Committee has actually met twice since the last time I reported. On the 24th of February, the Finance Committee approved deficit spending in the snow and ice removal account as at the request of the town manager. And also, as we discussed previously, the town manager presented the preliminary 2016 budget. At the meeting on the 26th, the police chief and fire chief both made their budget presentations. And this coming Thursday, they'll continue their budget presentations with the library, the Council on the Aging, and the Lunenburg Public Schools, which will be here in Town Hall and at 7 o'clock this coming Thursday, and also televised on PAC TV.
Excellent. Library Board of Trustees.
Certainly have heard from the town manager regarding the situation at the building. The library had to meet at the old library, at the Ritter Building, because they weren't able to get into the public library for their last meeting. One of the major items that they talked about, in addition to getting the building back up, is working with the Green Committee. They are about to implement the lighting of the parking lot with LED lights, and they worked with the library for which lights need to be on at which time for the access to the book drop and other things like that. They're continuing to have discussions with the approved consultant that the Green Committee has been working on for their internal lights, because there's a lot of electricity used by that. But it's not just as simple as just replacing existing bulbs with LED lights. There has to be maybe some different fixtures. So they're looking at what's the appropriate lighting level for that. So they're greatly working on that. They briefly looked at a building systems management process, which is in addition to the burner. It's the way to control it, as was mentioned when David Rogers spoke about with the air conditioning on, the heating on, whichever place. Part of it is the management system, but that would not qualify for Green Committee because it is something that needs to be done and won't necessarily have a return on investment. Two long-term employees will be retiring. One at the end of this month, Kate McCarran, and Karen Kemp in July. So they have been doing comparison to other libraries to make sure that they replace them in an appropriate way. Is this an opportunity to reconfigure? But they still need to do the same services that they plan to do at this point. Long-term employees.
Thank you. MPO.
The next meeting of the MPO is March 11th. There was not a meeting in February.
Planning Board.
There have been two planning board meetings since our last meeting. One was on the February 23rd. The first item on the agenda was Highfield Village, and there were several abutters in attendance relative to that hearing and who expressed numerous concerns or questions. Some of the key points were property egress. Currently, access to the project is proposed on Northfield Road, and there were a number of questions as to why there wasn't access on Mass Avenue. And the planning board reported that Mass Highway opposed egress on Mass Ave because of congestion issues, and emergency access to the site is proposed via Pope Road. Another concern that was expressed was that if the project requires blasting, that there be surveys done, pre-blast surveys on properties that are adjacent to the project. And the planning board assured people that there are permitting requirements under Mass General Law, and that pre-blast surveys would be required in the event that blasting is needed. That's not known at this time. Traffic congestion was another issue. Many residents are concerned about congestion on Northfield Road and potential safety issues. The project engineer reported that there was a traffic study done for the project, and at the intersection of Route 13, there is going to be a conduit for lights and 2 turning lanes. They're not going to put up lights, but there's going to be a conduit for lights in the event that they become necessary at a future date.
Are you talking about lights, traffic lights, or street lights?
Traffic lights.
Okay.
Number of people expressed concern about the school system and what the impact of additional children will do on the school system. The tax impact, residents are concerned with the cost of development on existing infrastructure, police, fire, roads, etc. And then one of the other final concerns was the effect on the water table and water systems. The project is proposed to be served by the water district, so it shouldn't affect wells, but another resident expressed concern about what blasting impact would have on their wells. So there were a number of residents' concerns. The planning board explained that if a subdivision plan meets existing regulations, then the planning board cannot deny by law. But there are a number of issues relative to the site. They're aware of that, and they're taking all that information under advisement. They continued the hearing to April 13th at 6:35 p.m. The next big item on that agenda was the Village Center District bylaw, and there was a lot of public discussion on that. They reviewed the bylaw, and really went through point by point on the Village Center District and talked about the need for a legal review once the draft is finalized. Also talked about the architectural preservation bylaw. And at last night's meeting, there was a joint meeting with the Historical Commission and the Planning Board, and they went through the bylaw. And some of the key points that were talked about is that the district consists of 78 parcels, and according to one of the members of the Planning Board, only a handful of those parcels can support the parking requirements associated with commercial or retail development because of the number of parking spaces that would be needed. Talked also about multi-use buildings, and can we see, a huge multifamily home. What was explained is that when you exceed 4 dwellings per unit, it triggers handicapped accessibility, and the costs escalate because handicapped accessibility becomes a requirement, as well as elevators and things. And so, but there's some concern about all of those issues. Why are we proposing to develop the town center? And the planning board explained that the goal of this bylaw is to preserve the historical character of the center, but also to bring back vitality to the center by encouraging adaptive reuse and walkability. They did make a few changes to the current draft. For example, glazing was reduced from the proposed of 60% minimum to a range of 35% minimum to a max of 60%. They clarified percentages of residential use for are for newly constructed buildings rather than for existing residential homes. So, for example, if you wanted to have a small commercial enterprise in your home, you would be grandfathered. It's for newly constructed that you can't exceed a maximum percentage of residential space. They went through the APD, and there was a pretty robust discussion on that, and they reviewed that draft. One of the key things that I thought was interesting, that there are properties in the village district that are outside of the existing historical district, but as it's currently put in the draft of the village district, all the properties within the village district will come under the architectural preservation district, so that we don't see unintended consequences, which is one of Mr. Ebersol's key phrases, which I think is really important. There was a lot of discussion regarding the advisory review recommendation, because in the draft that the APD, it talks about a review being recommended, but in fact it is required. So there's some talk about modifying that wording. There was a lot of discussion about whether or not the APD should apply to new construction or whether or not it should just be for existing buildings, and so, that discussion is ongoing. Discussion about how the design standards in the APD, which are very minimal, because the goal of the APD is to have a committee appointed for the Architectural Preservation District, which will adopt design standards. So there's just a vague outline in the plan as proposed, and it states that once that committee is put in place and those standards are adopted, that then they would come to this board. Now, it doesn't say that we were going to ratify it or any action. It just says reviewed. So I'm not sure what the intent is there. But one of the key issues that was identified is the need for some type of delay, because people could, once this is adopted and it goes into effect, and if people submit an application for a mixed use to the planning board, and there are no design standards under which the APD to review, how is that going to work? So whether or not we need to set up a delay or how that's going to work. A lot of talk on the enforcement section under the APD, because as currently written, basically if you violate the APD for 2 years, you can't obtain a building permit in Lunenburg. And a question came up about, well, what if there's a permit required in order to preserve the building? So, for example, you had an ice dam and the roof needs replacement. By not repairing that, you're actually causing more harm and not preserving the integrity of the historical structure. So that came up. So there's some work that needs to be done on the APD as well as the VCD. And Bob Ebersol generously offered to work with Adam Burney and the Historical Commission on revising that. One of the questions that came up is what has to be ready for the deadline of the warrant article. And I thought that I had seen, and this actually came up during the meeting, is that there weren't going to be, quote, placeholders, that you had to have the text for the warrant ready. So what is the timeline under which they need to operate?
Well, the warrant is open, I believe, until the 23rd.
22nd, I thought.
22nd?
Yeah.
Okay, so
Maybe the 23rd, I'm not sure.
The warrant goes to the printer right at the very, very beginning of April. So whatever is going to be in the warrant really needs to be in. I know people talked about placeholders. Placeholders sort of are while you get to the deadline, but when you get to the deadline, we need to have the text of what is going to be in. So if it's not in on the 23rd, the person who submits should not expect anything else in the warrant except what is submitted. So bare minimum, whatever the legal requirement is. But as you know, for anything to do with protective bylaws or these substantive bylaws, it's a lot easier if it's in the warrant for people to take up at town meeting.
Mm-hmm.
Just to carry through that, I did have a conversation with the chair of the Historic Commission today, and one or two members of the Historic Commission met with Adam today, and they started doing a lot of the work. So I believe they will have a text, whether it's the final, but I think it will be substantially complete by the 23rd for the Architectural Preservation District.
Okay.
And just one other clarification is that the Architectural Preservation District encompasses the Village Center District as well as the Historic District, so it actually extends beyond the Village District.
Right, and the public hearing on the Village District is, again, Monday night.
Here
Yes,
at 6:30.
yes.
Okay. Thank you. Public Access Cable Committee.
Public Access Cable Committee finally was able to meet after the snow stopped. They worked on 3 policies, including how they're going to format policies. They are going to plan on each meeting working on several of their policies. They reviewed their budget. They held an open house last Thursday to reach out to the community to see if people would want to volunteer and just learn about it. It's sort of fun to watch a new committee sort of come together and work. They've got a good group of people working on that, and certainly 2 additional people would be great to help them. And there's a regular attendance of some of the presenters on actual programs that are attending the meeting. I attend as a liaison, and John Henshaw is the liaison for the Finance Committee.
Excellent. School committee.
The school committee met on February 25th. The administrators met, the superintendent let us know that administrators met during the school February break to begin planning the transition in the summer of 2016. Mr. Launder reported the high school roof is leaking in the same places it did last year, plus 1 new one. They've had to move 2 classrooms totally out, and they won't be able to use those classrooms again, I don't think, this year, but certainly not while it's raining in there. They spent $10,000 over the last 2 years trying to mitigate these leaks, and they've had no success. They'll try again this spring so they can use them hopefully next year. The school calendar was approved for the next school year. They reduced February vacation to 2 days. So that they can get out earlier, so they have more time in the summer for transitioning. The superintendent sent us all a memo from the Chester Morris, the Massachusetts Secretary of Education, dating back to 2011, where he recommends that schools go to 1 week in March and give up the February and the April, because they're not going to let up on the number of school days required. So he's hoping that people will fit them in during the school year. The school committee will meet again on 3/4, so tomorrow night, and it's a joint meeting with the Calendar Advisory Committee. They want to make some recommendations about school start times.
School building committee met a couple of weeks ago. I was not able to attend. It was actually on site. It was typical kind of snowing. It was flurrying that day. But anyway, the weather has slowed progress, but it has not stopped it. The steel framework of all the buildings continues, and the building section A is tarped in and being heated underneath so that they can continue working inside. Obviously, all the buildings are being concentrated on. There's really obviously no groundwork being done. So things are on track, just a little bit slowed. They'll probably try to pick up the slack once the snow starts melting, which I hear is any week now. So, I don't have with me right now the exact next meeting. I think it's in
The 18th.
Okay,
It's the 18th.
the 18th. Thank you. So that's 2 Wednesdays?
2 weeks.
Yeah, 2 weeks from tomorrow. Okay. Sewer Commission.
Sewer Commission is meeting tonight. They had a workshop to come up with improvements to the sewer extension policy that they have. Pleasant View Avenue residents have been sent letters asking who would be interested in participating in a sewer extension project. As you may remember, the what's now Lunenburg Luxury Apartments was originally going to be houses, and they were going to renovate that street, and now that it's apartments, they're not going to. So the citizens of that street want to get sewer into that, and their encouraging response so far, anyone else that hasn't replied that they would want to do so. They've been regular about wanting to extend that. They are going out to bid on Pratt and Lakeview Betterment Project, so that's still on target for that process. That board has 2 openings, 2 members. I don't know whether they're running for re-election or not at this point. And just to to note that, as Mrs. Bertram talked about Highfields, part of that project would involve gravity sewer from Highfields, then would serve Maple Parkway and White Street from Maple Parkway to Route 2A. I neglected to announce that on the Library Board of Trustees, Jean Raboyne and Robin Venezia will not be running for re-election. They're long-term trustees and great service, so they're working to try to get people to run for those slots as well.
Thank you. Town manager reports.
I have a couple of items. The governor is set to release his budget tomorrow. I did circulate a news item today from that had a bit of information about what his budget proposal will contain, and in terms of local aid, it looks good with respect to the two items that they talked about. Chapter 70, his increase is 2.4%. We had 2% in the preliminary recommendation. That increase is about $40,000. And in the unrestricted general government aid, he is proposing to increase that 3.6%, and we had nothing included in there, so that was about $35,000. Nothing said about anything else. We could easily have that and more taken away somewhere else. We've talked about our choice tuitions, which are higher, so I mean it's too early to say, but I'm sure I'll have something to say about the governor's budget at the Finance Committee meeting on Thursday night. Last Thursday, I was asked to attend a meeting it was a joint meeting of the Bolton in Berlin and Berlin Board of Selectmen. They received a report from a consultant they hired regarding the feasibility of regionalizing dispatch services. The consultant that was hired looked at maintaining individual dispatch within the communities, those two communities joining forces, or those two communities joining the Neshoba Valley Regional Dispatch District. The consultant's recommendation was that they join the Regional Dispatch District. I think the report and recommendation was fairly well received by the two communities. Bolton is similar to us in that they have a new public safety building with a new dispatch center, so they're addressing that issue. Berlin is not in the best position. They need all of their equipment replaced to the tune of between $250,000 and $400,000, so it's significant. My sense was that maybe the two communities, their preference would just be to join together. But that's not the most cost-effective solution for them, and I think joining the Regional Dispatch District, again, was fairly well received. I don't know how many meetings they've had prior to this, but they were certainly a lot further along in their process than we were when we had our first meetings. The meeting was very well attended. There probably were 50 or more people. People asked, I thought, good questions. The savings that they would see are very similar to what we would see just for dispatch. They asked the same questions, mostly about what do you do with the public safety building, because you lose your 24/7 coverage. If they were to move forward, this is really at the soonest to December 2016. It's not anything that would be fast-tracked. I'm hopeful that they would be interested in joining. We have the capacity to take their call volume, I think, without much in the way of increases. The way that district is set up is everybody's an equal partner, so if you join, you pay an equal share. There were some questions about their call volume, their combined call volume is less than Lunenburg's call volume on its own, and it's not really fair that they would have to pay the same cost. But it's not a contract service. You're a partner in a district. So and we're all equal partners. And if you want to be represented on the boards, you pay the same as everybody. And, if you look at what each community provided, or the cost to provide the service individually, all the communities only ever had one dispatcher on duty. So, while ours were busier, our costs individually were relatively similar. So the savings is relatively similar. So I'm hopeful. This seems more promising than another community we were looking at. So hopefully that will go forward. But again, not anything that we would, we wouldn't project any savings in fiscal 16. We might see some, but more likely for fiscal 17. And the last thing I wanted to mention is very regularly I get asked, when is the volunteer appreciation social?
I was going to ask you that. I just wrote it.
It would be helpful if we talked about that. I originally thought maybe March 31st.
Yeah, the end of this month would be great.
My concern is whether or not you need another budget meeting, because you need to have. You probably could get away with voting on the budget at your first meeting in April. So we potentially could do March 31st. If you pushed it to the end of April, then we're just before town meeting, and you
Yeah,
probably
right.
need a meeting that week for town meeting. So just pick a date, because people want to know.
In the words of SNL character, it's always something. So let's just put it on the 31st of this month, since it's already been
Okay.
postponed. I can't believe that you had that on your list, because I was going to ask you about it.
Okay. So make the announcement, 6 to 8?
Sure.
Okay, go ahead.
So the Volunteer Appreciation Day will be Tuesday, March 31st, from 6 to 8 at the Eagle House again?
Hopefully at the Eagle House. All right.
Hopefully at the Eagle House. So hopefully we'll see you there, hopefully. Is that
That's it for me.
The one thing I want to talk about, and we talked about this after the appointment of many of the Conservation Commission members, is that that's one of the bodies that we don't have a liaison to. So I'd like everybody to think about that, and if we can put that on the list, that will, if somebody wants to do it, to be a liaison to the Conservation Commission.
And they meet Wednesdays?
Yes.
Yes,
Twice a month, I think, usually.
typically twice a month, the first and third Wednesday of each month.
Okay, and we have, under appointments, we have, are you proposing these? Is this where they're coming from?
Yes.
Okay, so the town manager is proposing to appoint to the Senior Tax Work-Off Committee 3 members, Jean Larkin, Sheila Cragen, and Mylene Malari, whose term to expire June 30th of 2015.
And these are, Jean Larkin is a citizen representative to the committee. Sheila Cragen is the Board of Assessors representative to the committee. And Mylene Malari as the treasurer collector, which is a required seat on the committee as well.
And but they're only going to serve till, are they replacements? Or is that all committee is active to from now till June 30th?
This committee, they're all one-year appointments to the committee. These are annually appointed. They're on your list of annual appointments.
So they'll be back when we do
They'll be
our
back.
annual appointments. So this is to finish out this year's.
Oh, that's what I'm saying. So these are replacements till the end of June this year?
Yes.
Okay, thank
Yeah.
you.
But intended
You
for long-term.
Right, I understand that, but that's why they're only for 5 months right now, or 4, okay. Do I have a motion on the request for these appointments?
I would make a motion to appoint Jean Larkin, Sheila Cragen, and Mylene Malari to the Senior Tax Work-Off Committee, term to expire June 30th, 2015.
Do I have a second?
Second?
Any further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? None. End of the agenda. Do I have any final public comment from the board this evening?
I just want to follow up on several of our comments tonight about various elected or appointed people leaving their terms for various reasons in their life, and thanking them for their service, some short-term, some very long-term, and to encourage other people that to step up and or go from an existing committee to an elected position. It's pretty rewarding, although it's hard work at times, and encourage the people to do that.
I agree. I think the town, when I moved here and realized that it was a open town meeting and the form of government that it is, where everything is as transparent as it can possibly be, it really truly is a citizen-run community. Obviously we have paid employees in various departments, heading up everything from town hall to all the professional public services, DPW, but all of it's overseen by elected officials who have other jobs. So, you can make a difference, and we need people to make a difference. So, yes, I encourage people to run.
Mr. Chairman, I echo that as well, and thank all the people who have chosen to take this opportunity to retire or resign or move on to other things. But I also want to say, lost in all those announcements was Mrs. Bertram's announcement that she's going to seek re-election, which I'm thrilled with.
Thank you. Thank you very
I am
much.
too.
Thank you.
And I did notice, I noticed this about 2/3 through the meeting, that we actually didn't coordinate to wear all black tonight.
I know, I was
I
actually
don't
watching it.
I don't know if people at home know this, but there's a small monitor so we can see what's on TV. And a few times I've turned up there when everybody's seen it, like the scene never changes because we have black seats and everybody's wearing black. So I don't know if we're, what the, I guess black is the old black. That's what it is.
No, I don't think that's the case.
So any public comment from the public?
One other thing.
Oh, sorry.
I just was notified that the roads are very bad right at the moment, and when I was over at the DPW meeting before I came here, the sanders were going out at that point, so if anyone is
Okay, so please,
about to go out, be careful.
yes, please be careful. Yes. Well, I guess we're saying that for us. I entertain a motion.
A motion to adjourn?
Second?
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? None. We'll see everybody next Tuesday night, March 10th at 7. Thanks, and good night.
Thank you, Jamie.